run this on monthly. So we started running this monthly since last year in March, and we've been running month on, month on. So today's session, we have a special guest. We've got Dr. Sharon Munyaka who's joining us. But before I introduce her, maybe let me just introduce myself for those who are joining us for the first time. My name is Dr. Mavis Majura. I'm an adult development and leadership psychologist. My mission is to transform survival-based leadership identities into emotional renewal, identity alignment for sustainable performance. So I spend most of my days in different organizations. And one of my passions is really helping women leaders, and having worked with women leaders over the past almost 17 years plus, there's patterns that we've noticed that repeat across organizations for, across, generations for women, but even also across even, countries. So there's patterns that we've noticed, for that are challenges for women leaders. And so these are the sort of conversations we've been having, whether through a presentation from myself or when we have a guest. Last week, we had a guest who was talking about, the idea of, strategic influence. And she is a CEO of one of the particular organizations. So we're trying to get resources, from the women who have navigated leadership challenges, whether, in the organizational space, in consulting space, so that we can have a rich dialogue where you can learn from some of the women that have gone through some of the experiences, you may be facing as a women leader. So welcome, and thank you for joining us. And I'm going to introduce to you Dr. Sharon Munyaka. Dr. Sharon Munyaka is an industrial psychologist, and I just wanted to actually just introduce herself before we start our conversation for today. And I'm just going to put in the chat box, what are we talking about today? So one of the things we're talking about today, or our topic for today, is really when excellence feels unsafe, navigating resentment and social cost of leadership. So as women leaders, we have also seen that sometimes being good at what you do can cost you socially. And this is something that has come from various conversations. But I want you to just connect with that and just tell us if this is something you've experienced or you've noticed. Dr. Sharon Munyaka, please introduce yourself to our participants for Leadership for Women.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mavis, and thank you, Tony. My name is Sharon Munyaka, dialing in from a very cold and wet Johannesburg. I'm glad I managed to put in a walk this morning before the weather turned. So I am in the business of people. I work at an individual level, really partnering with leaders who are navigating uncertainty, who are trying to figure out their why. I work with groups in terms of conflict resolution, in terms of just how we strengthen ourselves as a team. And I work at an organizational level as well, where we are trying to say, who are we as an organization and how do we show up in terms of our business? And the one thing that connects the different pieces of work that I do is really about humanizing workspaces. That's what makes me happy. That's what gets me out of bed every day. So thank you very much for inviting me to this conversation this morning.
Hey, welcome, and thank you for making the time. We're excited for our topic today. As women leaders, we navigate various challenges as we try and navigate, the leadership space or the organizational space. And as a woman leader yourself, I think, having worked with different organizations, obviously you have, you experience the challenges that we probably speak about in terms of, challenges that women leaders experience. So I'm going to just have a conversation and a dialogue with you, asking you, questions surrounding this particular topic. And I've actually posted our topic for today in the chat box. So please tell us, is this something that you've experienced, right? In your own personal leadership journey, have you ever experienced excellence feeling unsafe? But Dr. Sharon Munyaka, to start us off, our first question is, when excellence feels unsafe, what are we really naming underneath that? Or is it something real? Is it something that people experience in your own personal experience?
So when you sent the topic, I was like, how do I make sense of this? And it's something I can definitely resonate with. And I want to take it back a couple of years, 16, no, probably 17 years ago. I am a young industrial psychologist wanting to do a PhD. I go to this university and I'm being interviewed if I'm going to be a suitable candidate. So one of the questions was around, oh, can you even write? I mean, I'm looking at you. You're not the caliber of students that we would get. And so that comment was very loaded. But over time, I realized that a lot of it had to do with my gender, had to do with the color of my skin, had to do with my age. So for me, excellence became something that I strive for. I've always been, an achiever in my whole life, wanting to give of my best. But it's something that I pushed forward to because the conditions were saying you cannot. So, fast forward to my journey in life and navigating with that becoming the standard that excellence is non negotiable. Not perfection, excellence, right?
Mhm.
And where I have noticed it creates discomfort in some people. It creates a sense of, oh my gosh, this is a lot. It creates a space of shutting down. And yet, people don't know the origin. People don't always fully understand what it meant for me as a young Black woman in South Africa, having to say, I can do this, and why excellence became a prerequisite of how I work. So, let me stop there for now and
Okay,
hear more thoughts from you.
okay, thank you for sharing that. So for you, it's experiential where your sort of competence was questioned. And I think, yes, you have brought in the, kind of the intersections of gender. You've brought in the intersection of, mm, black race. So race, gender, and also age. And
Mm,
so how these were kind of playing out in terms of being your competence being questioned. But working with a number of women leaders, our competence is questioned all the time,
yeah.
despite, yes, the age thing will come in, it will have its different nuance, and also the race thing will come in. But I think working across generations and working across races, and working across, the yeah races, but also different generations of women, I see a lot of women struggling to prove their competence all the time. So
Mm,
almost being in a proof mode all the time, like not getting to a place where you're comfortable to say, you know what, I'm good at what I do and I own it. And therefore I show up that way. So yes, there is these dynamics, but there's also this, you are a woman leader. So the social conditioning around, do we have authority as women leaders? Can we own the authority? Or do we continue to navigate the idea of proving your competence all the time? And where does it end, if it ends?
ex exactly. So, does it actually end? Because unfortunately, the more competent you become, you are the default person who gets more work. You are
Mm,
the one who gets a lot of the pressure, like you must deliver. And you're
mm,
working against this backdrop of, I have to keep on proving that I can do this. And more so if you work independently. So
mhm,
I'm an independent practitioner and I get to interface with different organizations, and each client is treated as a single client. So you show up to the best of your ability. So now this competence, and we all come into the world with different stories. We all have our different paradigms, and we look at certain clues to say, yes, when you do this, then I can say the quality is great. I've interacted with some clients, for example, where you have given an excellent product based on your own parameters. Was it done on time? Did it meet all the requirements as discussed? But the other person at the end of the line makes it really difficult to sign off, for example, to process payment, for example. So it's a culture of the organization where someone is using their own filters. And, I will name it. So I've interacted with men who become the blockage in terms of
Mhm.
delivering or signing off the work. Oh no, we need to just add something else. Oh no, we need to do something else. And because as a woman, I'm thinking, my gosh, I need to keep on proving I'm competent. I end up going above and beyond. So part of it is my own self-regulation, my own self-management of saying, this is enough. I have given, as we discussed, and we stop here. And I think for us as women who are leading, and I think we need to get to a point at some point that we are just leaders, not
Mhm. Yeah.
put the subtext of women as leaders, but we are leaders, right? Where I am able to say without fear that no, this is the package. We're not going beyond this. Where I'm not begging to get paid, but it becomes a standard. When I do this piece of work, I submit it, I've met the requirements. Can you release payment? So, workplaces are very strange places sometimes. And depending on who you are, you might navigate it very differently. So, it's a multiple themes there, but I hope you
Yeah.
follow what I'm saying around
Yeah.
the experience.
Yeah. So you do bring multiple dimensions. And I think one of the things that you just raised now that says we should not be begging to get paid. And I'm thinking reality has it that women are still paid underpaid.
Mhm.
Reality has it women are still navigating, trying to get to senior level positions. So you still have a reality that you are navigating where not a lot of women really call those shots. You still operate in a patriarchal environment,
Mhm.
where to your point, you're saying the man is deciding he's the purse holder. You are probably, if you are in the space, maybe you are kind of, just monitoring the purse, but you're not the person that's deciding when we are spending it. You're the one just seeing that it's there and being cautious around the purse. So it's a lot of dynamics as you bring it. But I think Meryl brings something here and says we also need to speak about workplace culture where females are resented by other females because of their excellency, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
that is not always men resenting women. But I think before we answer this question, my next question was going to be, in your experience, when does high performance begin to create social tension? When does it create
So
social tension? Yeah.
So where I've seen it creating tension is where I am stipulating this is the expected standard for this piece of work.
Mm-hmm.
And when I send work back to say it's not the standard, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then people push back and say, "Oh, but your standards are too high."
Mm-hmm.
And yet, for myself at an individual level, I have carved out to say, well, excellence is a prerequisite for the work that I do.
Mm-hmm.
It's also around my own brand. It's also around the consistency in terms of my deliverables. So, where you have members of the team who are slacking, where you have members of the team who are not willing to be held accountable, the tension then increases. And so, what I've found in those instances is then needing to have a conversation. And oftentimes, it's come up in high pressured environments where deadlines are tight. So, I'm the type of leader who is very hands off, doesn't work for everybody. Some people want the leader to be walking alongside, hand holding. My premise is that we are adults, we've employed adults, and adults must come to work. And here's the piece of work that is expected of you. How are you going to bring it to life? But I'm also learning that people are different, especially with the hybrid type of working. Not everyone has the discipline of, I'm going to wake up in the morning, I'm going to bath, I'm going to sit at my computer, I'm going to work. Perhaps the conditions are not set up in that way. So
Mm-hmm.
now, as the leader, calling in to say, we have a deliverable, but you're sending me a report that is full of mistakes. Your information is not accurate. I'm sending it back for you to fix. My younger days, I would do the fixing. I don't do that anymore. So it creates a lot of tension because one is saying, oh, but you know, this is too much. Yeah, but if you had managed your time, perhaps you would have been able to do this work. So it's tightening the contracting of what I'm expecting. It's putting in place the conditions for someone to express their challenges. Oh, I can't do the work because I need this. Perhaps it's a guidance issue. But the tension has typically come up in high pressure moments where I send stuff back and then
Mhm.
people resist. So that's one clear example that I've seen happening over and over.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. So as you were sharing that, I remember particularly having a conversation with one particular CEO, and she says, the reason why people are not showing up. So she's a CEO of a small organization, and I think she's about 16 employees. And she mentioned that, she had this challenge with a team of them
Mm,
not showing up or not doing things according to the standard that has been stipulated. And she mentioned something. She said, I know that they're doing this just because it's me. And that's just because it's me was because I'm a female leader. And I've also
mhm,
heard it in another conversation, an executive who actually quit her leadership role because
mhm,
people would just not take her instructions. And she said it, she said, because it's just me. So I said to her, when you left your position and it was given to an executive male, did this team perform? And she said, the team performed without doubt, right?
mm,
So the team performed without doubt. So you do name the standard of work as one area of tension, but I
mm,
also see a possibility of just the social conditioning around who is to be a leader or who have
yeah.
we been trained to be a leader. And so there's kind of a passive resistance on, oh, you not actually a leader, but yes, you're a leader. So there is that
Mm,
you're navigating, that there's already maybe social tension that we are not aware of consciously, that it's
mm,
underneath and kind of shaping the dynamics in the team. But also you raised something about standards. So the standard is this. And I always have conversations with leaders as well to say, yes, considering that you've had to have excellency as a survival value,
mm,
because where you are and where you come from, for you to succeed in your role, excellence is non-negotiable. But
yeah.
not everybody lives that way or has to show up in a way where excellence is their survival. So I
Mm,
always say to leaders, and I stand to be corrected, there is your standard, and this also brings in the dynamic of emotional patterns, where
mhm,
if your emotional pattern is, stickler, you're a perfectionist. There's a
mm,
way you want certain things done, but I've also seen that put two sticklers in the same room, the standard is not the same; it changes,
mm,
right? So there's that bit of yes, you are a stickler, you've got a standard for yourself, but not everybody, and I always use this and say, so our emotional patterns come from our own traumas, but not
yeah.
everybody has your trauma. So you became a perfectionist because of the trauma you had to navigate. But the other person is a people pleaser, is a dominant emotional pattern, not necessarily a
Mhm,
stickler or perfectionist. So when you talk about sending back the work based on your standard, in an organization, should we have just a leader's standard or do we have an acceptable, good enough standard? But also
mm,
understanding that people are not at your level. So if they were at your level, they would produce your work. They are still under you. So therefore, that means that their work will not be at your standard. Yes, you are developing them to get to your standard. So where do we
mhm,
draw the lines between, yes, it's your standard as a leader, maybe you're a stickler, a perfectionist, right? But is there an acceptable enough standard for people to work with versus my standard as a leader versus an organizational standard? And we're talking
mm.
about how this creates social tension within the business or within the organization, and obviously creating resentment for women leaders.
So I want to underscore this difference between perfection and excellence. So perfection for me is an anxiety response,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of stuff that lies underneath that. So personally, I don't strive for perfection, right? Because there's a very different feel around perfection. People are not allowed to make mistakes. People feel like, oh my gosh, I can't even go and say I don't know how to do this. Excellence for me is a very different feel in terms of saying, how are we showing up? What is the work that we're doing? So it could have indicators like doing due diligence. So when someone submits a spreadsheet, It is accurate. I've done everything to the best of my ability to check the accuracy of information. I write a lot of reports, putting forward opinions that are going to be used to make decisions about people's livelihoods. I
Mhm.
better take the time to check that whatever I am putting in is correct.
Mhm.
And part of sending the stuff back, and I said earlier, I had to learn to not take the reins. And as leaders, we're constantly evolving. So sending it back is develop your own capacity to check yourself. Because I say to my team, you're not considering the person who's going to read this. So if the font is different, there's so many spelling mistakes. It's like the whole thing with time. So when I arrive late for something, I am not honoring the other person who's waiting for me. So it comes to our own values. It comes to who am I wanting to be in the world? Who am I wanting to be in this organization? So excellence is building up the discipline to say what is acceptable here? What is at risk if I don't take the time to check this information? So I serve on boards. Excellence means I need to read the board pack before I go in and endorse and say, oh, yeah, no, noted, or yes, I agree, because there are implications. So we have to really think about the pieces of work that we are responsible for. What is at risk if I, as a leader, do all the work and my team doesn't learn how to do it? I'm going to burn out. I'm probably going to suffer. My family will suffer. So there's that element, right? And I think it's important for us to also acknowledge we're human first. Our bodies are changing. Perimenopause is alive and well. So part of the reason, and I want to go to your example that you shared earlier about, the team that didn't work well with the leader who was a woman but worked with the man.
Mhm.
Ish, in my coaching conversation, women sometimes we are hysterical. We like to shout. We are emotional. We are doing all sorts of things. And then nobody wants to work with us. So we need to also own how we are showing up within
Mhm.
workspaces. We need to own our own emotional state. And I
Mhm.
appreciate you bringing in the emotional stuff. So when we are doing our work of self awareness, like, what's my stuff? And how
Mhm.
do I go into the space? I also want to acknowledge the issue of, the social conditioning.
Mhm.
A couple of years ago, I had a coaching client who just saw the name. So it was Dr. Munyaka, no picture, just the profile. He chose me, an elderly gentleman. I show up at this coaching session and he said, no, I don't want to be coached by you. I said, why? It's like, no, I expected a man. You are not what I wanted. And I said, so I'm going to challenge you. I will give you 2 free sessions. If you are still convinced that I am not the right person for you, then I will happily walk away. He became my star coaching client. We had such a fantastic coaching journey. And he is a father of daughters. But the social conditioning was women cannot lead, women
Mhm.
cannot be in spaces where they could support me. In my role
Mhm.
as a man, this is what I do. So I think the self awareness is so key. When we
Mhm.
understand our stuff,
Mhm.
it makes it easier to call out the team that's not performing. Like, I notice this, what's that about? And when you have a conversation, the breakthroughs come over because someone might say, I grew up with a mother who was a housewife.
Mhm.
So I struggle when I see
Mhm.
you as a young woman sitting in the CEO's chair. In my mind, I'm like, what is this little girl going to tell me? And it's understanding from their viewpoint. So it's not always about the other person. It always starts with us. Where am I at? Who am I being in this organization? And how am I showing up that contributes to what we are seeing?
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that there's so many dynamics that it sort of kind of brings up. You talking about giving the free sessions, again, proving yourself, where in a world it should ideally be, surely you're qualified.
Mm,
That is why you actually were part of the panel, whatever the case might be, but you constantly have to almost prove yourself. And I think this is a constant burden for men, women leaders, which sometimes, to your point earlier, ends up having more women having what we call raw overload.
mm,
So you take on, and then there's now blurry boundaries. Your yes is your yes because you're trying to prove that you can do this. You're trying to prove that you've got the competency. And I think that becomes a burden. But I think you said something that, the self-awareness and the self-regulation becomes critical, because you need to get to a point where you're like, not mine, theirs. But I think
mm.
the dynamic plays around, you still have a bread and butter issue, which is also lingering at the back of your mind. So as you're trying to make those decisions and choices and exercise agency, there's still
Mm.
that at the back of your mind to say, can I make this choice? Can I set this boundary? Can I reinforce this boundary? Even though it might mean also the resentment, because you are enforcing that boundary. You could also get resented for putting that boundary on, because people
Yep.
are used to women taking care of their needs. So when you say no more, that in itself can create some level of tension. But let's explore the women resenting other women for excellence. So you're getting successful, Dr. Sharon. You are, doing your very best. So instead of me clapping hands for you, I find out what is wrong with you, or I, spread negative news about you. What is it about us as women that makes it difficult for us to celebrate and sort of honor one another when someone is succeeding, when someone is doing their best, or they are actually experiencing excellence, or they are showing up excellently.
So jealousy is a terrible emotion. Unfortunately, it is alive and well amongst us.
Mhm.
And what I've noticed is jealousy shows up. And what jealousy does, it challenges me in terms of what I could have done. It challenges me in terms of, oh, why this person?
Mhm.
So what ends up happening is I'm trying to feel good about myself. So I'm going to spread the lies. I'm going to find anything negative. And it happens more often than not. And what I find is the higher you go up, the lonelier it becomes. So the circle becomes very, very small. My circle, my village is tiny. It fits on one hand. And precisely because of that. And what I've learned is that not everyone is privy to my heart murmur because I am still human.
Mhm.
I make mistakes. So when I share my vulnerabilities, one must understand it can be used against me because not everyone who's smiling at you rising and being in that leadership position is happy for you. Unfortunately, it's other women who are the worst at spreading. And I'm sure you've seen on social media a lot of reports around, especially women leaders being accused of being bullies, being accused of being toxic. And for me, my understanding of all of that is we're not doing our work. We're not doing our work of creating an understanding of what still sits within me. So it could be different choices. I often hear women making remarks like, oh, yeah, so and so is successful, but oh, they're not even married. Making those slide comments. Oh, they don't even have children. And it's other women doing that. And it's awful. But we look for clues to make ourselves feel better. Social conditioning. We're like, oh, how big is the diamond ring? Oh, did you see? It's a tiny, tiny ring. Shame. Or did you see her clothes? Why do we do that? And for me, it comes back to jealousy. It comes back to us being challenged by what this other person has done.
Mhm.
And so we can only manage our behavior. and our response. So between stimulus and response, there is a gap. And in that gap is our opportunity for freedom and for growth. So the stimulus will remain the same. I know there's some women, when I walk into the room, and I always tease about my red lips. I love red lipstick. It's my fave, right? Social conditioning, people would say, oh, light-skinned women, oh, they probably, in the streets or whatever. They don't even know me, but they're putting me in a box because I'm challenging their stereotype. Oh, she probably got it easy in life because she's pretty, but they don't even know the story. So instead of being activated by all these different and unkind comments, I show up as fully me. I show up in my humanness and I own the work that I have done. And I always remember that broken crayons still color because the journey hasn't been easy. The journey has had the ups and downs, the rejection, the pushback, the system that is not always welcoming. So when other women do that, I notice in myself, like, oh, something is happening. And I'll end off that comment with a story. So I do a lot of speaking events and facilitate conversations. So we're on this platform, probably about 200 people in the room. And I am managing time and saying we have a lot of panel discussions that, need to happen during the course of the day at this gathering. And the person who was moderating was another woman. And she lashed at me. So she's got her mic, everybody is listening, and she says, why are you only targeting me? Why didn't you remind everybody else? In that moment, I could have chosen to lash back. But I just walked off the stage and I said, oh, I hear you. And then I came back and reminded about the time. However, I needed to hold her accountable. So afterwards, I spoke to her. I said, so let's just talk about what happened on stage. What was happening for you? He says, oh, what? The defensiveness comes, right? And then I said, so this is what I experienced. I experienced being lashed out at. I experienced feeling like, what did I do wrong? I am managing time. I am trying to get this program to flow in a particular way. And we have discussed as a team, I've briefed you, but you are going rogue and doing this whole thing. And the body language also, and women, we can be quite aggressive and quite awful to one another. But I stood my ground, like, self-regulate. You're not going to turn this into a fighting contest. As we spoke, I understood stuff that had happened leading up to the day. She'd lost her phone. She couldn't find her glasses. She didn't sleep much the night before. She was anxious about this presentation. So the stimulus could have been, I'm also going to attack, I'm going to say awful things about her. But actually, by just slowing down, creating a space where we could talk, I understood what happened. So, yes, other women are going to be awful. Other women are going to say bad things, but it's in choosing how I respond in that moment. That's where the power is. Choosing to have a conversation, choosing to understand. Oh, so you've been saying this about me.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I think I'm just liking the reframing. So you go and have a conversation, but your approach is not you did this to me. You're owning your own experience. This is what I
Yeah.
experienced
Mm.
versus you did this to me. And that kind of de-escalates or
Yeah.
neutralizes the emotions, and so that you can have a conversation, which then allows you to even get to know the person even further. But you
Yeah.
mentioned something that I want to explore a little bit further. So jealousy is a natural emotion. We all feel jealousy. And I know
Mhm.
sometimes we demonize this jealousy, but I always say we all feel jealousy. The
Yeah.
difference is in how we use it, whether we're going to use it humanly or we're going to use it inhumanly, right? So jealousy is an indicator. So what emotions are they? Just feedback loops. it's just an indicator of what is important for you. So there's something in that person, the success of that person, you desire it, but maybe you're not yet there. But you don't know how to use that feedback loop, which is the jealousy, to get more information to get in the direction where you want to get to. So in fact, then because it's a negative emotion, then you actually then start being, to your point, attacking the person, or, being insecure and start, sort of talking about the person behind their back. But the emotion itself is not bad. Jealousy is not a bad emotion. It's an indicator. It's a feedback loop. Yeah. It's telling you what you desire. But if you don't know how to self-regulate and you're not self-aware, you will unconsciously deploy it, and mostly in a negative way. So which is what actually ends up happening. And I think what you raised then is the importance of inner work as leaders. Yeah. Because if you don't do your inner work as leaders, it is very easy to get trapped into the social conditioning. So we show up how everybody else is showing up. Okay. And I think the other thing that you also mentioned is the idea of it's typical for women to do that. And someone kind of explained this way, to say, I think it's the idea of crabs in a cup, that they will keep on pulling down each other to the bottom. So they will not let the other one fly out. Or is it frogs? I can't remember. So they won't let the other frog jump out, because there's safety in numbers. We as women have been socialized to do things in groups, right? I often joke and say it's women that ask each other at a conference to say, let's go to the bathroom. So we will even go to the bathroom in groups, right? Something that is not typical of males. You wouldn't hear a male colleague saying, "Ow, it's time to go to the bathroom, let's go." So we've been socially conditioned to do things in groups, and we've always done things of low, I don't know if to call it low value together, like birthday parties, just in stock sales. I wouldn't say stock sales is low value, but these things that we do together in group birthday parties, we organize together. But now success is about climbing the ladder one by one. So who goes first? So there's an element underneath of, oh, you're leaving us behind. And we don't name it. We don't even know it consciously that it's happening. So there's a resentment of you're leaving the tribe, but we're not thinking about, let's support this person going up so that she can take the tribe, up. But we've also seen that because you go there, you're the only female in the room. To survive, you actually start acting like the men in the room. And that's a survival strategy. You're not trying to be funny, but you're just realizing, if I am to survive in this room, maybe it's not even a conscious decision for many people. You just end up adapting to the social norms and the way people play the game, the way the game is played. And then therefore people then look at you and say, oh, you see, now she's operating like a male. I've had female leaders on our Leadership for Women program saying, oh, I've been nicknamed Margaret Thatcher as a result of now being so assertive, not, goal-oriented. We are doing this, holding people accountable. It's not something that we're socially trained. We're trained to take care of other people's needs and all our needs in a group versus, going up. So that is an interesting one that we need to continuously navigate, to say, how do we understand our social conditioning and how it interferes with the emotions within experience or the interpretation of the events that are happening around us. Another woman's success, what does it mean? Is it a threat to me? Right? We're talking about insecurity, but the insecurity is kind of programmed. It's something that we've been trained, that most people are not consciously waking up and say, I want to hate Sharon. But there's the way you've been wired and socialized, that if you don't do the inner work, you might not even be able to notice that this is what is going on. So you're not able to hold even yourself accountable. But thank you for that. Let's see if there are any questions in the group. I know that we do 45 minutes and we just have 3 minutes to go. But as we are doing, so there is a comment here that I would read. Okay, so Chipo says, thank you, Dr. Mnyaraka, for highlighting the issue of jealousy, where women struggle to express admiration for fear of being misunderstood. I love it, right? So it's admiration in reverse.
Exactly.
Right? So we struggle to almost, be able to express and say, hey, I do admire you, well done, how are you doing this? So we don't have that conversation as we need to have it. So honestly, just being aware all the time to say, when I'm feeling something negative, what is a positive side of it? Because I'm experiencing just the other side of it, the yin yang. I'm experiencing the negativity. What is the positive on the other side? So I'm just checking again if there are any questions. And if anyone has a question, you can just raise your hand or just unmute and ask a question regarding the topic that we are talking about. When does excellence feel unsafe? And how do we navigate resentment and the social cost of leadership? Yeah. So how do you navigate the social cost of leadership, considering that we women are, not only us, but we're more social, definitely, than our male counterparts, right? We do enjoy to do things in groups, but sometimes success means leaving the group. Okay. Sometimes success means you being the first, right? And how do you actually manage that? But also, how do you support those who are going first? If you've got a female leader, how do you support her instead of you experiencing the negativity? Okay. Dr. Sharon, you have been on one of our leadership programs, the Leadership for Women. Sorry for putting you on the spot here. And so what has been your experience? Because I know that as women leaders, we meet together, we have conversations like this. It's 45 minutes. We take out the nuggets and the information from this content. But when it comes to actually application and self-change, I know that only 20% of people can self-change. The rest of us, we need to be held accountable, or we need to be taken through a process. And I think what I have enjoyed the most about our relationship is that you coach me, I coach you. So you went through our Leadership for Women program. What would you say in terms of women who are trying to navigate and navigate the leadership space? How do they develop themselves? Why does it matter to go through a process versus just an event where you get information?
So the brain thrives on routine. And what I appreciated about the Women in Leadership program is the structure that it provided, because there's so much that we would want to change. You'd be like, oh, people have called me the Iron Lady. Oh, people don't tell me their issues. I only find out when it's a crisis. Oh, I don't have enough hours in a day to get through everything. What the program helped with is just taking me on a journey. And that's helpful because then I have someone to talk to, I have the audio, I have the manual to read through and go back to. So the learning keeps on being reinforced. And it wasn't a once-off event. It's a document, it's a manual that's readily available. If I need to revisit anything, I can grab, my file and just read through. I also read my own notes around the journaling because as life is moving, there's stuff that's going on, the tools around my dream list, the goals that I'm setting. It's something that I still continue to use because it was something that was part of the program, but actually realizing, oh my gosh, I can't just get into the year and kind of hope everything is going to work out. But the structure and the process of working through it was really a game changer in terms of the things that I want to achieve. And it's so encouraging when at the end of the year, I can tick off and say, oh my gosh, I set this goal. This is what I did. Oh, wow. The timeline that I'd set for this particular goal, I actually managed to meet it before then. So the discipline, it's not going to happen by itself. And so the program really supported me in putting my intentions into a structure and into actionable and manageable chunks of work for myself as I go through life. So I would recommend it to anybody who wants to develop themselves. It's a journey and one has to commit to it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Minyaka, for that feedback. So you're here, you're listening to this topic and the various topics that we have. It is good to sit here and have these conversations. We are getting information, but we are saying if you want sustainable change, you want to take your leadership to the next level, we have a transformative process, the Leadership for Women program, and we will email you, information regarding the Leadership for Women transformative process, which is a 10-week program that really helps you to take your leadership to the next level. And with that, ladies, thank you so much for joining our conversation. We really appreciate you. Remember, we run this monthly, 45 minutes on a topic that women leaders are navigating. And so thank you for joining the conversation. Dr. Sharon, Thank you so much for being with us and sharing all the nuggets, all the, sort of wisdom. We're sitting here and we're listening to you and we're like, okay, I can understand that. I can relate to that. I resonate with that. So thank you so much for sharing. And I can see that the participants are really appreciating you. So thank you, everyone, and have a great long weekend. If you are in South Africa, we definitely can spend more time in our blankets. Have a great one. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Mavis and
Thank
Sharon.
you.
Thank
As someone who may not be in your core target market, that was still absolutely fascinating and instructional. People,
Yeah.
thank you very much for giving us your very valuable time and attention. It was, I hope that you got as much value out of it as what I did. We will be writing to you shortly with details of the recording if you want to watch it again or pass it on to somebody else that you think maybe get benefit, as well as Mavis will give us some information on some of the events that she has coming up. With that, I'm going to end the meeting. Thank you so much. Enjoy the long weekend.
Thanks,
And
Tony.
I hope the weather warms up a little bit for us. But otherwise, have a great weekend. Goodbye.
you so much. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye,
Take care.
everyone.